Well, good evening, everybody. I believe some people will still be joining us, but I'll mention a couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. First of all, let me show you some upcoming programs that we have in September and October while we discuss this. So this program, as you probably noticed, is being recorded. So please keep your microphone muted unless you're asking a question or making a comment. The recording will be available on our website sometime in the next week or so. And second, we will be giving a copy of the handout of the slides to registrants in the next day or so. So there isn't that big of a need to scramble to take detailed notes unless that's sort of what you do. In that email that we send out, we will allow you to give us some feedback through a brief survey, a link to a brief survey. So please do take advantage of that when we send it out. So in terms of upcoming programs, on September 21st, Susan is hosting a virtual program on fall prevention at 7 p.m. filled with practical advice, which might be helpful to you or to a loved one. For those of you who yearn to travel or are curious about interesting cities, Susan and I are presenting a virtual program on Seattle. It's part of our Voyagers Travel Discussion Series. And this particular program is on October 6th at 7 p.m. So if you want to know more about this vibrant city or would like to share your own personal experiences with your fellow attendees, please do register for the program. And finally, on October 27th, Susan and I are once again presenting a virtual program on password managers. We planned this program pre-COVID, and we're excited to finally be able to present it to you. We'll talk about how password managers can make your online life easier and more secure. Are there any questions before we begin? If not, Susan will...
Just a housekeeping note. September 28th, the virtual PowerPoint Smart Art and Animations at the bottom of the screen, that has been canceled. So that's why Mike didn't mention it.
Oh, that was my mistake. Sorry about that. Before we get any further, my name is Mike Edding, for those of you who haven't been to one of my programs, and I'm joined tonight by Susan McBride. We both work in the Adult Services Department at the library and share a love for all things related to food. Our Kitchen Tech series of programs focuses on ways to make cooking easier, more efficient, and with better results. We like to explore the ways that technology can help in the kitchen, but we'll sometimes look at more general topics like this one on reinvigorating your pantry. We'll talk about ways to easily add flavor and interest to your everyday dishes. So Susan is going to get us started with seasonings.
All right, sorry. Seasonings. So seasonings are the foundation of flavor in your pantry. And finding new and different ways to season your food can help take your old dishes and bring new life to them. So that's why seasoning is important. So let's start with the foundation of flavor, which is salt. And as you can see, there are a lot of choices in salts that you could be using. The differences between them are subtle. They are determined by where the salt comes from, how it was obtained, and how it was processed. And so that's what's going to give it each salt a slightly different quality. So everyone's familiar with table salt. It comes in the blue canister with the umbrella. If you want to get a better result from your salt, you may want to skip table salt altogether Table salt is more heavily processed to eliminate minerals. It contains an additive to prevent clumping. It has iodine added to it. And so it's been highly processed. And the end result is it has a slightly acidic or bitter aftertaste. So instead of using table salt for your seasoning, you may want to try to find a fine sea salt for your basic salting needs. It is less processed, has a fuller flavor, and because the minerals have not been stripped out of it and it is very fine in texture, you can salt with precision. Sea salt is harvested from seawater, and it has a complex flavor because it's got a lot of the minerals from the seawater in it. And so if you use it as a finishing salt, meaning you put it on your salt after your food has been cooked, then it will add that extra mineral flavor that you may not notice it, but it's there and it adds some complexity. Another salt that is good to have in your pantry is kosher salt. And probably a lot of us do have kosher salt in our pantries. Kosher salt has larger crystals and a lower salinity, making it a good choice when you're salting water for pasta or salting meats. It dissolves quickly and it makes a good general use salt. It's also nice to sprinkle it on top of food prior to serving because you can see the big crystals of salt right sitting on top of the food. But if you want to pump up the salt that you're using, you may want to add flake salt to your pantry if you don't have that already. Flake salt is very large flakes of salt. You can see them. They range in size, but they're quite big. And it's enjoyed for its texture. You will sprinkle it on the top of your food, and then when you take a bite of it, you can feel the crunch of the salt and get the flavor of the salt. And it's a very enjoyable, pleasurable experience. It's particularly nice on things like avocado toast or things with a softer, smoother texture because it gives contrast. And then real quickly, these other salts, pink salt is a salt that gets its flavor from trace minerals. And so again, it's going to have this special nuance of the minerals in it. Black salt is a volcanic rock salt, and it has a sulfurous flavor. And so it's kind of got a flavor like eggs, just a hint. But so you'll want to reserve that for well-chosen dishes. And then red salt is sometimes referred to as alea, and it is an unrefined sea salt that's been mixed with an iron oxide rich volcanic clay from Hawaii. And that's what gives it its characteristic red color. It's mostly used for color, but sensitive palates, which would not be mine, but sensitive palates can discern a slightly sweet finish from the added iron oxide. So that's the basics on salt. But you can get into these gourmet flavored salts that will add a whole new depth to your pantry. So flavored salts like garlic salt, onion salt, celery salt have been around for a while, and you're probably familiar with those. But recently there's been an explosion of these very specialty flavored salts appearing on the market. And they have migrated from the more exclusive gourmet stores to mainstream grocery store shelves. So they're much more accessible to everyone. So you can see here a couple examples are black garlic, habanero, Pinot Noir. They're, just very interesting flavors that have been combined with the salt to give your dishes a little extra oomph. So while some of these flavors may seem a little too specialty for everyday use, I do want to highlight a couple categories of the flavored salts that do have a pretty wide range of use that you would want to consider adding to your pantry. So the first of these is smoked salts. Smoked salts are sea salt flakes that have been infused with smoke from real untreated wood. There are no artificial flavors or colors, and the salt is smoked with bark-free woods for up to 2 weeks. And during this time, the wood imparts its own unique flavor profile to the salt. And it can range from being pretty subtle to being pretty bold, depending on how long it's been smoked and what kind of wood is being used. Smoked salt is a great way to enhance the salinity of a dish while imparting the smokiness that is inherent in the burnt wood and the flavor that's unique to the type of wood that was being used. And it's perfect for anyone from meat eaters who maybe want to beef up their barbecued meats to vegans and vegetarians who are looking to add that barbecue grilled meaty flavor to their vegetarian dishes. There are a variety of ways that you could conceivably use smoked salts. So if you don't have a grill or you don't want to grill, it can impart a grilled flavor to your foods because of the smokiness. It can be added to popcorn or fresh veggies, even grilled cheese sandwiches to pump up the flavor in your snacks. You can sprinkle it on your eggs or your avocado toast in the morning to give a nice start to your breakfast. But really its special place, its sweet spot is to be used in barbecue sauces and chilies and soups like split pea soup. Even pasta sauces can benefit from a smoky element. And of course, using it as a rub on meat prior to grilling will add all-day smoked flavor without the weight. You can even rim your cocktail glasses with smoked salt to give it a surprising touch. Salts can be smoked with a variety of different woods, and each one adds a slightly different element to your salt. The most common are applewood, hickory, and mesquite. So applewood would add kind of a sweet, fruity, woody flavor, which would pair well with lighter foods like shellfish, fish, poultry, and vegetables. Hickory would give you that strong, smoky taste that epitomizes Southern cooking, and it's perfect for ribs or burgers, red meat, pork, turkey, even maple syrup and honey, ham, bacon, any of those would do great with hickory smoked salt. And then mesquite has a distinctive Texas flavor, and it's also good for red meats, but you can use it on poultry or really anything that you would cook on the grill. So one salt, smoked salt that's harder to find, but is interesting and worth seeking out is this Fumé de Sel, which is a smoked Chardonnay oak salt. So it is salt that has been cold smoked in small batches over pieces of old oak barrels that were used to age French Chardonnay. It is more delicate than other varieties of smoked salt, a gentle, smoky flavor with a savory hint of the Chardonnay wine. And it is fantastic to use it on seafood or in delicate sauces or soups. This is just one variety of it. You can find it different brands, but it is available on Amazon if you're interested in looking for something like that. I haven't seen it. I might have seen it at Whole Foods. I've not seen it at Jewel or Kramer's. Another type of smoked salt is the smoked bacon salt. And I think Mike has, I've never used it before. I think Mike has used it in the past, but it's been smoked with alderwood and it has the flavor of bacon infused in it. You want to make sure that when you buy a smoked bacon salt, that it is actual bacon that is in the salt and not artificially flavored, because then it's going to have an artificial taste. But it's a great way to add a bacony, smoky flavor to dishes without actually having to cook the bacon and create the mess of it. Two other flavored salts I want to mention are truffle salts and citrus salts. Truffle salt is made by mixing traditional salts with pieces of either white or black truffle. They are tightly sealed in a container, and then the truffle aroma will permeate the salt and give the truffle salt a distinctive earthy truffle flavor. Real truffle salt, therefore, has real pieces of truffle. Anything else is likely flavored using synthetic chemicals, and it will have that telltale artificial truffle flavor that you probably want to avoid. Much like truffle oil, truffle salt is going to be used as a finishing garnish. You're not going to cook with it. You're going to put it on top of the food when you're done cooking. And just a few grains of this salt, you can really enrich the flavor of anything that you cook with. It tends to be more mild than truffle oil, so it would be easier to control the amount of truffle flavor if that's a concern of yours, if you use the salt over the oil. Truffle salt is good on a lot of things. Roasted potatoes, scrambled eggs, macaroni and cheese, popcorn, avocados, tomatoes, but of course, French fries are the cream of the crop for the truffle salt. You can get this truffle fries. Truffles are expensive, therefore, so is truffle salt, but it's a lot less expensive way to add truffle flavor compared with adding actual truffles. So this Casina Rosa black truffle salt can be purchased at Williams-Sonoma for about $30. So it is a splurge, but if you like truffles, it's definitely worth it. And you can also find other mushroom and fungus flavored salts, like porcini mushrooms, and they would impart their own obvious unique flavors to your food. Citrus salt is another really versatile flavored salt, and it can actually be made at home pretty easily. This is an example of citrus salt that you can buy, and it's orange flavored with ginger. But you can also, like I said, make it at home just by adding the flake salt and citrus zest and combining it, letting it dry, and then storing it in an airtight container. So if you use lemons, you could salt cucumbers or salads or grilled shrimp and fish with it. Lemon salt really brightens up peas and soup. You can use a lime salt on tacos and fajitos or to rim your margarita glass. It's even great sprinkled on honeydew melon and watermelon. Orange salt is a great addition to salt chickens, turkeys, fish, roasted vegetables, and a lot of times orange salt is mixed with other things like thyme or rosemary. Think about your Thanksgiving turkey with orange salt and different herbs. It would be delicious. Finally, grapefruit salt. You can use that. The salt actually helps tame the bitterness of grapefruit. And I haven't tried this, but I've read several places that using grapefruit salt when you're baking chocolate brownies adds a really nice complexity to it. And you don't really taste the grapefruit, but it complements the chocolate. So that might be worth trying. Then from salt, we'll go to pepper. So black peppercorns are the most common type of pepper everybody uses. They can be labeled with where they come from, their place of origin, whether it be Indonesia or India, Vietnam, or Ethiopia. They all come from the same plant, but the variations in the soil in the different places will give each type of peppercorn a slightly unique flavor. But you've maybe heard of green peppercorns, white peppercorns, and red peppercorns, and they are all the same plant. They're just different stages. So the green peppercorns are the young pepper berries that have been picked before they ripen. And they're a lot of times sold in jars with brine. White peppercorns are actually black peppercorns that have had the outer hull removed, and they have a more earthy flavor than the black peppercorns have. They pair really nicely with pork because of the earthiness of them. And then finally, red peppercorns are the ripest berries. They go from black to red. And they are, they've been on the vine the longest, and they are therefore the most expensive. They're more fragile than the other varieties. And so you're not going to put them in a pepper grinder. You're going to want to use a mortar and pestle and create more of a mash with them in order to use them in your cooking. And they have a lot of flavor, but less heat than the other colors of peppercorns. And then finally, if you've heard of pink peppercorns, they're not actually peppercorns. They are berries from a completely separate shrub from South America. But you can use them and sprinkle them on salads or on tops of different dishes. They are very delicate, so you're not going to want to mill those either. And they have a sweet, sharp, and delicate flavor. So moving into spices and spice blends. So everywhere in the world, there are flavors that define different regions. There are some well-known seasoning blends. I think of herb de Provence or the Italian seasonings that you buy in a little plastic, jar. But joining these old standbys in the spice aisle at more and more markets, you're going to find some lesser known spice blends that are a little more exotic and that are going to add a whole new profile of flavors to your cooking. So I'll start with kind of the most basic, the everything but the bagel seasoning, and you can get these anywhere. I'm just showing you the Trader Joe's variety. The Trader Joe's variety includes sesame seeds, sea salt flakes, dried minced garlic, dried minced onion, black sesame seeds, and poppy seeds. And I think that's somewhat standard with all of the everything but the bagel seasonings. Some great ideas of what you can do with this versatile seasoning are to mix it in softened butter, and you can create a really flavorful compound butter that could then be used on steak or chicken or vegetables to finish them off. You can sprinkle it on kebabs. It's great on sweet potatoes. You can put it on salads or in hummus. You can sprinkle it on your pizzas. And we use it every day on avocado toast in my house. It makes the best avocado toast because it's got all of the seasonings already built into it. Another Trader Joe's seasoning mix that is really phenomenal is everything but the elote. And it mimics the flavors that you're going to find in the Mexican street food elote, which is the corn that has the seasonings on it that stick to it with mayonnaise and then it's grilled. Minus the corn, it doesn't have the corn. But it's a blend of salt and chili pepper. There's Parmesan cheese, there's chipotle powder, there's cumin, there's coriander, sesame seeds, salt, and I think Trader Joe's throws in some sugar cane sugar, and some corn flour. I think there's cilantro too. And so it's got a lot of different flavors in it, and that gives it a lot of versatility. So what you can do with it, you can obviously put it in anything corn-based. So you could put it on corn on the cob, popcorn, cornbread, corn fritters, corn salad. But it's also great on anything grilled. So chicken, fish, zucchini, any vegetables. It's good in tacos, fajitas, even mac and cheese to give it a little pumped up flavoring. Excuse me. Another seasoning blend is za'atar, which is a Middle Eastern spice blend that can be traced back to biblical times. And this is a picture of za'atar. It's another blend that can have a lot of different things in it. It's typically savory dried herbs like oregano, marjoram, thyme, and then toasty, earthy spices like cumin and coriander. There's usually sesame seeds in it and salt. And most importantly is there's sumac in it. And sumac gives it the delicious, unexpected tanginess that to me is the key of za'atar. And some of the things you can do with za'atar is to sprinkle it over hummus or on baba ganoush. You can put it over fresh pita and drizzle it with olive oil before toasting it in the oven. It's really great with eggplant and zucchini recipes. You can even sprinkle it over fresh tomatoes, cucumbers, and feta. It's delicious on roasted chicken or with sweet potato fries. And you can pick it up at a lot of local markets, but if you really want to get the best, I recommend trekking into Chicago. There are many Middle Eastern markets right around Lincoln Square, and they blend their own in-house za'atar, and it's very fresh and really delicious. So a quick note about sumac, which is usually in za'atar. If you're able to find it on its own, you might want to consider scooping it up. It's got a tangy, sour, acidic flavor that's sort of reminiscent of lemon juice. And it adds just a really great pop of flavor, brightens your dishes, and a beautiful red color to go with it. It is really highlighted well on fried foods. Think like vinegar chips, that kind of delicious flavor combination. It's a little addicting. And it can also be used in any marinade and will just brighten it up. A couple other spice blends that I want to mention. Garam masala is a blend of ground spices that's used extensively in Indian cooking. The word masala means spices, and the word garam means hot. It's not hot as in spicy hot, but it has warming, spicy flavors in it. Traditionally, the spices and their amounts vary from cook to cook and sometimes from dish to dish. But the basis of most garam masala is a combination of a lot of whole coriander and then smaller amounts of whole cumin, cloves, black pepper, and cinnamon, which are then roasted together and then ground in a coffee mill or a spice mill. If you don't want to roast and grind your own, you can pick up a bottle pretty much anywhere at any grocery store. And it's best when added at the end of cooking. It can even be sprinkled on a dish when serving. It's great with curries and lentils and soups, or even on scrambled eggs. And then two more spice mixtures I want to mention are togarashi, which is a 6-spice Japanese blend. It usually has Korean chili, orange peel, seaweed, ginger, poppy, and sesame seeds. I use togarashi in a recipe that I make for spicy tofu sushi, and it's kind of like spicy tuna sushi, but it's tofu, and it adds a really great seasoning. It's not super spicy, and the seaweed adds kind of umami notes, and there's some texture in it with the sesame seeds, and it's really quite good. You can sprinkle it on all sorts of things like pizza and popcorn. You can put it on bland things like quinoa and rice. It's great on seared salmon or seared chicken and roasted vegetables. And then finally, dukkha. I think I'm pronouncing that right. That's how I've always pronounced it. And it is an Egyptian spice blend that is made with a nut blend. I use pistachios in mine, but you can also use hazelnuts. It's got sesame seeds, and then it has several different types of herbs. It has been around since the age of ancient Egypt, but it's really popular and has, I've seen it popping up in a lot of recipes lately. Traditionally, it's been served with bread or raw vegetables and olive oil for dipping. But once you taste it, you're going to want to put it on a lot of different things. It's great as a rub on meats. I put it on vegetables when I'm roasting them, and it just adds it really elevates their flavor. Again, you can fold it into hummus or dips. You can stir it into whole grains or pasta dishes for a quick lunch. You can even put it in your homemade salad dressings and give it a different take on a familiar flavor. Moving on, I'm going to get into some oils. I'm going to do some oils and then some vinegars. So fat is not just a nutrient essential to your body, but it's a key player in cooking. Fat will carry heat. It helps cook foods quickly and evenly, and it also coats your taste buds to make flavors linger longer. So it's really important in your cooking. I know we're all familiar with vegetable oil and canola oil and olive oil, but there's some other oils that I wanted to just bring to your attention. And one thing I want you to look at is the smoke point of the oil. The higher the smoke point, the higher you can cook with that particular oil before getting a kind of a burned flavor. So these oils on the top row have a pretty high cook point. The oils on the bottom row have a pretty low cook points. So these are going to be used on lower heats or with no heat at all. Avocado oil, grapeseed oil, and peanut oil are all great for searing foods and cooking foods at higher heat, meats or vegetables, and they're not going to get the burned flavor. Avocado oil is extracted from ripe avocados after the skin and seeds are removed. It is high in monounsaturated fat, and it's considered more heart healthy than saturated fat. It's also a good source of omega-9 fatty acids and the anti-inflammatory antioxidant vitamin E and lutein. So it's got some health benefits to it. Avocado oil is great in a salad dressing, but it's also great for pan searing, stir frying, and sauteing because it's 482 degree smoke point. Grapeseed oil is another great one with a 420 degrees smoke point. It has a very clean taste. So it's really an ideal all-purpose cooking oil. Another thing I want to mention, well, first of all, olive oil, the extra virgin olive oil does have a fairly low smoke point. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention that you probably should not be using EVOO for pan searing things because you're going to get a slightly bitter burnt taste if you do use that. Coconut oil is a really, it can wear a lot of hats in the pantry. If you're looking for a fat substitute when baking, you can use coconut oil because at room temperature, it is in solid form. It behaves more like butter or shortening in baked goods, and it will cream up light and fluffy when beaten with sugar. But it also will melt, and it will give you a mouth feel that is less greasy than butter or shortening. And so it's got a really nice ability to do a lot of different things. So refined coconut oils are absolutely neutral, and they don't have a taste or an aroma of coconut at all. On the other hand, virgin coconut oil does have a coconut odor, and it can have a mild to intense coconut flavor depending on the brand. So you're probably going to want to look for a refined coconut oil unless you are looking specifically for that coconut flavor. And just as a note, if your recipe calls for a neutral oil, it means an oil with a neutral flavor. And so pretty much any of these will work. The coconut oil might be an issue. Sometimes extra virgin olive oil can have a pretty strong olive flavor. So you may want to watch that. But the rest of these would all fit the bill for a neutral oil. But beyond basic oils, you can find infused and flavored oils. And these are oils that have had herbs and other seasonings added to them to impart a more complex flavor in the oil itself. You can purchase these oils already infused with flavor, but you can also infuse your own oils. Most infused oils are best to be used as a finishing oil, and that will help preserve the flavor that is within them, and it will better enhance your food. It'll give your food more of that taste. Probably the most popular infused oil is garlic oil. It's a delicious dip for bread or really drizzled over anything that would benefit from the flavor of garlic, including salads or steamed vegetables. You can find garlic olive oil at any grocery store. I think this one came from Whole Foods, and it's very versatile. You want to look for a higher quality olive oil, and it's going to have a better flavor, but it can add anything to just about any dish. Mediterranean herbs and herbs de Provence are also popular infusions for oils, and they work great in salads or with pastas and vegetables, and they make a great dip for bread, even adding a touch of Parmesan cheese and some red pepper flakes. If you want to make your own infused oils, you can add some dried herbs or even some fresh herbs to your oil and let them sit. But then you want to drain off the herbs because they will mold and go bad, and the oils will last longer if you do that. Just a quick note, if you're doing garlic oil, you want to store that in the refrigerator because garlic oil is prone to developing botulism bacteria. So you want to strain it and then use the oil within a week, and always use a good quality olive oil. Lastly, with oil, I want to talk just a few seconds about finishing oil. Finishing oils are oils that you're going to drizzle on your dish once they've been plated and are finished cooking. They add visual appeal. They add a rich flavor that adds extra fullness of texture. And they are just that. They're oils that are meant to finish a dish and not to help cook it. Extra virgin olive oil is probably one of the healthiest oils you can use. And it's great with its low smoke point. You're not going to cook with it. So pouring a small amount of a very high quality extra virgin olive oil over a few slices of heirloom tomatoes and mozzarella cheese and basil leaves and sea salt, and it's completely transformed the dish. A high quality truffle oil can take plain potatoes or pasta and really turn them into a gourmet dish. And nut oils are also excellent finishing oils. Walnut oil, like the one pictured here, is cold pressed from the meat of dried walnuts. It's got some health properties that are positive, promoting heart healthy diets. It's got a very rich and nutty flavor, and it's ideal for salad dressings or for finishing some dishes, even a pasta dish. You don't want to heat it. It will become bitter if you heat it. But you can frequently see walnut oil paired with a raspberry vinegar, making a really flavorful vinaigrette. It's a great option. And so that's a little bit about finishing oils. Lastly, I want to talk about vinegar. Vinegar is another opportunity to really up your culinary game. It is an undisputed force in the kitchen. It's an ingredient that can brighten muddled flavors and really bring dishes to life. And, you know, white vinegar and apple cider vinegar and balsamic vinegar, they will all do the trick. But if you're sticking to those alone, you're really missing out on a whole world of vinegars that can add some really fruity or vegetal flavors that make your dishes complex and really sing in a way that those basic vinegars that you're going to buy don't. I'm talking about vinegars that come from producers of small batch vinegars. So Acid League is one of these small batch producers, and I've got a picture of 3 vinegars from Acid League that they sell at Whole Foods. They have a whole wide range of flavors, not just these 3. Garden Heat, Meyer Lemon Honey, and Strawberry Rosé are what you can get locally, but you could also get chamomile tea, vinegar, toasted coconut vinegar, and Szechuan 5-spice vinegar online. Instead of adding the spice and the fruit flavor to a neutral vinegar base, what Acid League does is it ferments the actual ingredients from the start. And so this is going to result in a more complex flavor. Their strawberry rosé is really fruity, really sharp too. It makes a really complex salad dressing, but you can even use it in your gin fizz cocktail to give it just another element. It's that good. On the opposite end of the spectrum is their Garden Heat vinegar, and this is made from carrots, celery, and jalapeno juices. A perfect use for this particular vinegar is in gazpacho, and you will build an incredibly depth of flavor that you wouldn't get otherwise. And then in the middle is the Meyer Lemon Honey vinegar. And when this is turned into a vinaigrette, it is amazing on top of fish. It just really creates a delicious finishing sauce for your fish. Another company that does these small batch vinegars is Brightland. And again, these are available at Whole Foods as well. Brightland offers two pretty fresh, zingy flavors. Parasol, which is the one on the left here, is a champagne vinegar. And they use Navel and Valencia oranges as well as Chardonnay grapes to make this really fruit forward flavor. It is really good just drizzled out of the bottle over a salad or on steamed vegetables. It's got a very delicate and fruity flavor. It's also delicious with chicken and fish. And like Acid Leak's strawberry rosé, it is so mild and fresh that it can be used in a gin fizz cocktail as well to really bring a brightness to it. Their balsamic vinegar on the right is called Rapture. It is a really intensely flavored vinegar, but it's still juicy and very light, and it somehow manages to avoid being overpowering. It is a raw balsamic vinegar, meaning it's not pasteurized, and it's been double fermented with Zinfandel grapes from California, but also ripe Triple Crown blackberries. If you are looking for a balsamic vinegar to use in a reduction, this is the one that you want to go to. It's got such a smooth flavor that it's never going to get that really strong bitter flavor that some of the cheaper balsamic vinegars can get when you reduce them. It's also great with salads, and it goes really great in marinades. And drizzling it over fresh tomatoes and mozzarella, it's very good in barbecue sauce. And then drizzling it over peaches and summer fruit is to die for. So these are both crafted from produce that have been grown on small family-run California farms. So they're very tightly controlled. They control the quality of the process. So these are some really great, interesting vinegars that will definitely pump up your pantry. So I've covered the most basic elements of flavor in your pantry. Mike is now going to discuss upping your condiments.
Thanks, Susan. So condiments are really a quick way to add a lot of flavor to a meal or a snack. They come in an incredible array, and there's simply not enough time to discuss all the varieties of condiments tonight. So if I don't mention your favorite condiment, please share it with the group in the questions and comments section after our prepared remarks, and don't be offended. I'm going to kick off my discussion of condiments with an American favorite, ketchup. There are a large number of ketchups on the market, but perhaps the most iconic of all of them is Heinz ketchup. This is the brand that you get in packets at fast food restaurants. It's what people kind of think of when they think of a ketchup flavor in America. But one thing to note about Heinz is that, like many common tomato ketchups, it uses high fructose corn syrup as a sweetener. So if your family is concerned about HFCS, or you'd like maybe a ketchup with only organic ingredients, I'd suggest taking a look at Annie's organic ketchup or Heinz's own organic variety, which, like Annie's, tends to do pretty well in taste tests. There's certainly many alternatives to normal ketchup, and I'd say spicy ketchup is probably the most common of these. I'm quick to try any spicy condiment when I can, and my favorite spicy ketchup is by 78. So 78's spicy ketchup adds just a little bit of heat, enough to make it interesting. For what it's worth, there's no high fructose corn syrup in 78's ketchup either, and this is what I use to dip my French fries into. The next condiment I'd like to talk about is mustard, of course. We can't talk about ketchup without talking about mustard. As you know, the classic hot dog in Chicago has mustard on it rather than ketchup, so it's important that we get it right here. Standard yellow mustard is probably the most common and popular form of mustard, with French's being an exemplar of this type. But we can't mention yellow mustard without talking about Chicago's addition to the mix, which is Plotchman's. Plotchman's has roots in Chicago. It was founded in the 1800s and is still producing great mustard, led by their original mild variety. It may be interesting to note that Plotchman's mustard has this distinctive kind of barrel-shaped squeeze bottle, and they kind of pioneered the squeeze bottle. It was the first successful condiment that had that form. So thanks, Plotchman's. A few years ago, I went to the National Mustard Museum in Middleton, Wisconsin, which is outside of Madison. In addition to having exhibits on the history and the variety of mustards, they have this expansive retail store with nearly every mustard you could think of. So I talked with one of the mustard specialists there, and I came away with several bottles based on their recommendations. Of all the mustards I tried, my absolute favorite was one called Kelly's, which is pictured here. It was a revelation in terms of how much flavor and complexity a standard mustard can have. It's slightly sweet and has a little bit of horseradish to it. But thankfully, you don't have to go to Wisconsin to get it. I buy mine at Jewel Osco now, and I buy it in multiples of 2 or 3 bottles at a time because I never want to be without it. In case they go out of business, I'd be devastated. So Dijon mustards are notable as well. They originated in the town of Dijon, France, as you might guess. It's in the Burgundy region of France. And Dijon differentiates itself from mustard, from yellow mustard, by the use of white wine, and it has kind of a punchier flavor. It's not surprising that they have white wine in their mustard there because the Burgundy region of France is known in part for their delicious white wines. We're all familiar with Grey Poupon mustard, but you might also consider another mustard from this area of the country called Maille. Maille dates back to 1723 in the city of Marseille. I also like brown and spicy mustards, and among the best in this category, I would say, are Sir Kensington's and Kosciuszko, which is now distributed by Plotchman's. And those are great. But if you want a real mustard kick, I'd say you have to talk about Coleman's mustard, which is an iconic English mustard. You can find it ready to use in a glass bottle, but I buy it in its powdered form. So you simply reconstitute some of the mustard with a little bit of cool water and let it sit for 10 minutes. And that really develops the flavor and it gives it a big punch. It brings some serious heat, but you can use the powder to make a vinaigrette. It acts as an emulsifier, but Coleman's is great. Similarly, I'd like to also recommend a German mustard called Lowensanft Extra. It's not too hard to find here in the States. Its style is similar to Dijon, but it packs even more heat. So it's not really for the faint of heart. So I'd say use it kind of sparingly as a condiment. One thing I like about Lowensanft is it comes in some of their varieties. You can get it in something that looks like a toothpaste tube. So I'm kind of amused by using that on my dishes. Next up, we'll talk about mayonnaise. It may surprise you to learn that mayonnaise is the most popular condiment in America right now. According to some estimates, mayo sales are nearly 3 times that of the next most popular condiment, which is ketchup. Most of us have some sort of mayonnaise in our refrigerator. It's a versatile ingredient, and it adds creaminess and tang to our salads, sandwiches, and deviled eggs. I like to use it instead of butter on the outside of my grilled sandwiches. It browns up nicely and adds a zip of flavor that butter doesn't. I'd say people are pretty loyal to their mayonnaise brands. I grew up with Kraft mayonnaise, but I moved on to Hellmann's in my adulthood. Hellmann's, interestingly, is nearly the same product as a brand called Best Foods, though some say Best Foods is slightly more tangy. Best Foods, though, is sold west of the Rocky Mountains and Hellmann's to the east. I want to mention just a couple of other mayonnaises popular, particularly in the South. The first one is Duke's. It's a brand that's sugar-free, and it has more egg yolks than most other mayos. And it's got this really silky, remarkably smooth texture. So Duke's is definitely worth checking out. I don't remember where I got my my canister of it, but I found it around here. I didn't have to mail order it or anything. One that you might have to mail order is called Blue Plate, and Blue Plate is from Louisiana, and it has its devotees as well. It adds a little bit of sugar to the ingredient list, which can make it a nice counterpoint to an otherwise acidic salad, for example. Now, you'll hear a lot of chefs talk about Kewpie mayo being a game changer. And I certainly have kept a bottle on hand for the last 10 years, not the same bottle, but a bottle. It's a little different from the other mayos that we're mentioning here in that it uses only the yolks of eggs, not the whites too. And it uses rice wine vinegar. It originates in Japan. So it has a distinctive flavor profile that I really find pleasing. And it used to only be found in Asian markets here in the United States, but more recently I've seen it show up in places like Walmart, Target, and Jewel. So I highly recommend it if you haven't tried it yet. And finally, you've probably seen a lot of flavored mayonnaises out there. One of the flavors that's trending right now is truffle mayo. Susan talked about it, using it in salt, and there's obviously, of course, truffle infused oil, but truffle mayo is something that can also add some nice flavor to your dishes. A brand called Truff is the one to look for. Now, other flavored mayonnaises include like sriracha mayonnaise, which is quite popular. There's brands like Lumke C and Heinz that make sriracha mayo, and it gives a little bit of heat and spice to an otherwise relatively bland ingredient. Speaking of heat and spice, I'd like to talk about some condiments that are hot and spicy. It's maybe my favorite area of condiments. The first ones that I'll talk about today are vinegar-based, and they often use fermented peppers in their preparation. You might hear them described as Louisiana-style hot sauces. Tabasco is the most well-known of these. Personally, I like a brand called Louisiana hot sauce, which is not as spicy as Tabasco, but you'll also find fans of Crystal, of Texas Pete's, of Frank's Red Hot, and of course Frank's Red Hot is used in buffalo wings, so that's famous in its own right. My next grouping of hot sauces are kind of international in origin. I really like the brand Marie Sharps. They're a brand of hot sauces from Belize, and Marie's hot sauces often use carrots as a base to provide a little bit of sweetness to the habaneros that she often uses in her hot sauces. And since habaneros are a little fruity, that plays along with the carrot sweetness, and it makes a really nice hot sauce. And they come from relatively mild to pretty darn spicy. Piri piri is a type of hot sauce from Portugal, and it's made from African bird's eye chilies. It's most often used in chicken dishes, as evidenced by the South African chain Nando's Peri Peri Chicken. Spicy condiments from the Middle East and North Africa include harissa and jug sauce. And jug sauce in particular is pretty interesting. It contains not only chilies, but olive oil and fresh parsley, and in some cases, cilantro. So that parsley and cilantro really give it a green, fresh flavor that works really well with the spicy kick from the chilies. In some ways, it's similar to an Argentinian chimichurri sauce, but it's spicier. And finally, in this category, I needed kind of a catch-all to talk about general hot and spicy condiments. And the first one of these is hot honey. And for those of you who are unaware, hot honey has received some buzz in the press and in the media over the last few years. I'd say the best known brand is Mike's Hot Honey, but I've tasted hot honey from Trader Joe's, which I have pictured here, and it's also quite good. One really excellent use for hot honey, and perhaps the most well-known use, is drizzled on pizza. It adds this sweet and spicy punch to your pizza, but the sweetness is not one note. Since honey is a little more complex, it gives it a little more depth of flavor. So in this sort of catch-all general category, I'd also put Trader Joe's jalapeno sauce. It has a lot of flavor to go along with relatively moderate spice levels. And finally, I'll give a shout out to Yellowbird hot sauces from Austin, Texas. My favorite Yellowbird variety is the one made with serrano peppers. It's got a medium level of heat and a nice green flavor. So Yellowbird, I think I got mine. I had to order them online, but I believe nowadays they're better distributed and you can probably find them in a place like Whole Foods. So of course we can't talk about hot and spicy condiments without at least touching on Mexican hot and spicy condiments. The Mexican and Tex-Mex influence in this area is not to be denied. Mexican hot sauces get their heat from a variety of peppers, including jalapeno, chipotle, serrana, mirasol, guajillo, ancho, and chiles de árbol. And all of these have their own different flavor profiles, and sometimes they're mixed in combination, but they're all delicious. So the first kind of spicy Mexican condiments I'll talk about are those found in the refrigerated section of your favorite grocery store or market. Pico de gallo is a great example. It's a mixture of diced tomatoes, white onion, cilantro, jalapeno, and lime juice. And you'll also find that many markets have a house salsa that's made fresh. It comes at various heat levels usually. And a lot of those same ingredients can be used in guacamole by adding avocado. So you can use guacamole as a delicious spread for a California style sandwich, or maybe just to enjoy as a dip with tortilla chips. When we move over from the fresh salsas in the refrigerated section to jarred salsas, we often see chunky varieties. I remember in college, I would buy Pace chunky salsa by the gallon, literally, and eat it with tortilla chips. In addition to Pace, Tostitos has chunky salsa. Ortega has thick and chunky salsa. They're readily found in grocery stores. For a step up, you might try the Frontera brand salsa, which is, part of Rick Bayless's Mexican food empire. And Frontera is obviously a very nice Mexican restaurant in Chicago. Now, smooth Mexican hot sauces are also very popular. You can find brands like Tapatio and Cholula on the table at many Mexican restaurants. And these are great. I like them. But I'd like to add a couple of others to the mix. First up is El Yucateco. And I actually prefer this brand over Tapatio and Cholula. It comes in several varieties, including the green and red chili habanero varieties that are shown here. They have really good flavor and are not particularly expensive at all. I'll give a shout out to a sauce I learned about on the internet a few years ago called Secret Aardvark. And Secret Aardvark is kind of a hybrid between Mexican and Caribbean spices. I'd call it sort of medium to hot in spice level. It's a little bit thicker than some of the other sauces I mentioned in this category, but I'd still call it relatively smooth. Regardless, it's really tasty. So check out Secret Aardvark if you can find it. The next condiments I'd like to touch on are those that have kind of an Asian flavor to them. Many of the most interesting condiments and exciting condiments come from Asia. We've talked about Kewpie mayo. It's that distinctive Japanese mayo made with rice wine vinegar. Sriracha has certainly caught the public's attention over the last several years. It's made its way into all sorts of products, including lip balm and beer. So clearly Asian cultures are onto something when it comes to these condiments. So let's talk about Asian sauces. They include soy sauce, that versatile and salty liquid that's packed with flavor. But have you heard of a sauce called yuzu kosho? Yuzu kosho gets its name in part from the yuzu, which is a fragrant citrus plant or citrus fruit originating in China, but it's become really popular in Japan. I think it's the most popular fruit in Japan. So that's the yuzu part. Kosho refers to the chili peppers, which are added to the fruit in production. So in addition to the chili and the citrus notes that you find in yuzu kosho, it has a fair amount of salt to it. So if you're using this condiment, you don't need to salt your food too much. So this yuzu kosho can kind of cut through the fatty taste in meats, and it can balance out sweet foods because it's got that citrus tang. It's really great for seasoning fish. I first had yuzu kosho in a salad dressing, and it was really great for that because it's so bright and zesty. It pairs really well with the creaminess of salad dressing. So it was really a delicious combination. You can get a small bottle of yuzu kosho at Trader Joe's, and that's the image in the middle. And I have to throw this other sauce on the far right in. It's called Charboy's Hot and Sweet Asian. It's just a nice all-purpose condiment to keep on hand. It's sweetened with honey, and it's slightly spiced up with cayenne and habanero peppers, but it still has a relatively mild flavor. I think it's fantastic on chicken. In fact, I had it on chicken tonight, but can be used equally well on scallops or shrimp. I got my bottle at Whole Foods Market on Kingery Highway, but according to their website, they sell it at Jewel as well. There's certainly many other Asian sauces that I could talk about, but I'd like to move on to pastes. I will mention, though, that yuzu kosho is often sold as a paste, so you can get it in that form or the sauce form. The first paste that I'd like to talk about in any sort of detail is gochujang. It's a commonly used Korean condiment. It's sold in a tub that looks a little bit like a small margarine container. It's made from fermented soybeans, hot peppers, aromatics, spices, and glutinous rice. And that glutinous rice gives it this kind of thick and sticky texture. You usually don't use it alone, but you might incorporate it into dips and stews. You might use it as a grilled meat marinade and things like that. Gochujang is what adds a distinctive flavor to the classic Korean dish of bibimbap. The flavor profile is rich, a little evocative of tomato, but with a solid punch of heat and some sweetness. Different brands have different spice levels, so you might want to experiment before you find one that's tailored to your taste. Another Korean paste you want to know about is ssamjang. It's similar to gochujang, but it's a little bit less sweet and has a richer, more savory flavor. And they're related actually because samjang uses gochujang as one of its primary ingredients. You use samjang typically as a sauce in lettuce or cabbage wraps, but you can use it to make basically a stand-in for American barbecue sauce if you want a different flavor profile. It does really well. And the last paste I'll talk about hails from Indonesia. It's called sambal olek, and it really brings the heat. It has red chili peppers, vinegar, salt, and aromatics like things like ginger and garlic and scallion. I actually prefer sambal olek to the more popular sriracha sauce because it's spicier and less sweet. I use it in many of the same scenarios though. You can find sambal olek at most large grocery stores nowadays. It's widely available. And the final group of Asian condiments I'll talk about have some texture to them. The first is something of a cult item in culinary circles. It's called Lao Gan Ma spicy chili crisp. And it's similar in many ways to chili infused oils, but it adds this textural element of crunch with pepper seeds and soybeans, and some of them use, I think, peanuts to add that crunch. You'll know you find the right brand, this Lao Gan Ma brand, by the sort of severe looking maternal figure on the front of the bottle. She doesn't look like she's having a good time, but she certainly knows how to make spicy chili crisp. I like to use it on pizza when I want a little less heat than crushed red pepper flakes, because it doesn't really have a punch of heat. It's more like a slight warmth that comes through. The oil really mellows it out. People also use spicy chili crisp in stir fries, and you might even try it on ice cream to see how that works. And finally, I'll talk about kimchi for just a moment. It also comes to us from Korea and can be thought of as salted and fermented cabbage with a kick. In addition to cabbage, they use other vegetables like radish, celery, cucumber, and scallions, to name just a few. Because it uses fermentation as a preservation technique, kimchi has sort of a funky flavor, but it's delicious. The level of heat that you get, of course, depends on the brand you get. And even some brands have multiple levels. Kimchi is starting to become pretty widely available in most grocery stores. But if you're looking for a great selection, I would recommend going to H Mart in Naperville or Niles, or even better, if you go into Chicago, there's a place called the Jungbu Market, which is just a fantastic Korean wonderland of ingredients. So kimchi is usually used as an accompaniment to meals like Korean barbecue. It's pretty versatile, and it's an easy way to add a complex flavor and some texture to things like eggs, fried rice, or even sandwiches. I'd say give it a try. The final thing I'd like to talk about is umami. It's a little bit different than what we talked about before. Umami has been described as a fifth taste or fifth flavor after sweet, sour, bitter, and salty. Umami is sometimes called the savory flavor. If you use some ingredients that have umami in them, they can add a lot of depth to any dish, and it makes meaty dishes seem meatier. If you haven't really experimented much with adding umami to your foods, you'll find that it can really help them sing. It's in a lot of natural ingredients like dried mushrooms, Parmesan cheese, anchovies, and the like. I'll mention a few others in this section just to give you some ideas. So first up is MSG, and it's been around for a while and got an undeservedly bad rap in the 1970s for supposedly causing a reaction in a few people at Chinese restaurants. It's now thought to be perfectly safe as an ingredient unless you're allergic to it or have an unusual sensitivity, and that would be extremely rare. You can find MSG in most grocery stores under the brand name Accent. My personal favorite way to add umami to dishes is with fish sauce. It's made out of fermented fish fish ingredients, and it's a funky Southeast Asian sauce in Thailand and Vietnam. My favorite brand is called Squid, but I also like the Three Crabs brand of fish sauce. You don't have to use much to add depth of flavor, and by the time you add it into, a stew or something, you're not going to notice any fishy flavor. It just kind of melds everything together and makes it taste more intense. You might want to keep a jar of Marmite on hand in the kitchen too. It's an acquired taste, of course. If you try to eat it directly on buttered toast, which is a common way to do it, but if you incorporate it into a sauce, it really fades into the background and adds depth. And that's true for anchovy fillets, anchovy paste. They kind of just blend into the background and give you a nice punch of flavor. So Worcestershire sauce and soy sauce are also great sources of umami. But I'd suggest experimenting with a lot of these different ingredients just to see what works with what dishes, and maybe you have favorites. I'd say they definitely can help most any dish, especially those that are meaty though. So this is really all that I've prepared on umami, and this draws to a sort of conclusion our prepared remarks, but we'd certainly like to hear what your thoughts are on any of these things, from oils to seasonings to condiments. So please share or ask questions.
So Mike, I wanted to ask you a question. Did you, in your research, did you find anything called curry ketchup?
It didn't come up in my research. I've had something in Germany where they have currywurst that I imagine is something similar to that, where they have a somewhat spicy ingredient in their ketchup to give it some extra flavor. Is that something you're familiar with?
Yeah, I've had it served to me at a couple different restaurants this summer, and I've never heard of it before. And it's delicious, and it's you can have it. I think we got it with either French fries or sweet potato fries, but I mean it's ketchup, but it has some curry, the spices from curry seasonings in the background, and I highly recommend it if you can find it. I just didn't know if the restaurants had created their own or if it was available on the market. I haven't really looked for it.
I'm not sure. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. The other thing is, in seeking umami, we bought a powdered umami from Trader Joe's, like a mushroom umami that you can like sprinkle on different dishes, which is really good.
Yeah, I have that one as well, and it's nice to have it in a powdered form, so you can. I mean, it's pretty easy to control the amount that you're adding to it. It definitely has that mushroom kind of umami taste. I like it. I like all Trader Joe's spice blends and that sort of thing.
So we have a comment. Cranberry mustard is one of my favorites, especially on pepper turkey sandwiches. And
that sounds so good.
Yeah, I want to know where you get your cranberry mustard. If you have a particular brand that you are favor, or is it just any cranberry mustard? Dietz and Watts. Gotcha. Perfect.
Yeah, I've had raspberry mustard, but I haven't had cranberry mustard. That sounds good.
It sounds really good. Any other pantry items that you all think would really be worth sharing? Well, I hope that everybody was able to pick up a tip here or there tonight. We had a lot of fun putting the program together, trying new things, seeking out some things that we hadn't tried before. I'm really into vinegar now, so that's fun.
Well, Trista says that she always has dry sherry on hand to marinate meat, presumably, or chicken, or that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a good point for sure.
Oh, with soy and ginger. That
Ooh,
sounds really good.
That sounds really good. So dry sherry with soy and ginger. Well, thank you all for coming tonight. It was a pleasure. Sorry we ran a little long. We had a lot of things we wanted to cover and we got very excited about it.
Yes, so look in your emails and we'll send out the slides from tonight's presentation and that brief survey link too. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.